Okay, quick look at MAD game development. Quick look at Farseer, quick look at bodies, shelf, target, ball, bit of physics, and then some collision detection. The thing to do, I've got to do an apology at this point. I don't know a lot about Farseer. Okay, I know a bit about physics. I don't know much about this program, except that I do know how to do the things I want to make it do. And as a programming philosophy, this ain't a bad one. So if you don't want to know any more about physics than what I know, just steal my code and run with it, because as I'll show you in a minute or two, you can use Farseer to actually get quite a lot of work done for you. It's really powerful. You can tie things together and make them pivot and do all kinds of really good stuff. But you can also do what I've done, which is much, much simpler. If you know better ways of doing what I'm doing, then just feel smug and keep fairly quiet, okay? Because there are better ways of doing what I'm doing, I'm sure. It's just that my ways work for me, and I'm perfectly happy to basically sacrifice shed loads of processor power just to get the effect I want on the screen, okay? So that's where I am with this. I'm using version 2 of Farseer, which is not the latest one. The reasons for this are twofold. One is I don't know how version 3 works, and the other is that 2.n works with XNA 3.1 and Windows Phone XNA 4. So if you want to actually move your game onto Windows Phone at any point, then you can get Farseer 2 working on it. I've actually got that going, and I've got things moving around in the physics environment on the phone, which is quite nice. So I think when you're writing code for these platforms, one of the things to keep in the back of your mind is, oh, I might make a phone version. Because as students, you can sign up through DreamSpark to Marketplace, and you can put your phones out. In fact, is Harry Overs here? One of our students, Harry, he's got his game out on Marketplace now, and you can pay 79p. He took last year's Pong game from the first year labs, and he made it into a Marketplace product. He's now actually selling it for 79p a pop. I'm not sure how many he'll sell, but that's not the point. When he goes for a job interview, you can say, oh, I've got some games on Marketplace. You could think about doing that with whatever you're making, and for that reason and others, I'm sticking with Farseer version 2. I've actually changed the scenario slightly, although the artwork is pretty much to the same high standards that you're used to. I've got a ball. I've put a dot on it so we can see it spin. I've got a house which has suddenly lost its roof, of which more a bit later, and a shelf. If you have a physics environment, things behave according to physics, which means that if I put something on the screen, gravity goes and it just falls down. Okay, not useful. So what I've done here is I've made a shelf, which is that bit there, and put the house on it. And so the idea of the game at the moment is to actually knock the house off the shelf. And what you do is, or my game plan for my version of Destruction Golf would be that, say the hole is over here somewhere to the far right, and we have a series of platforms which are basically the fair way to get to it. And the idea is you knock whatever's on this platform off, and then tee off from there to get to the next platform, and so on and so on. So that's my rough scenario of the game. And I think you could actually make something quite playable just by stealing this thing and adding some more game assets. So the idea is I'm going to be firing the ball, hit it to here. When I've made it to that one, I'll then aim at the next one, and so on. And this one's fairly simple, as you'll see in a minute, but we can make objects out of composite items and put those up should we wish to do that. So that's where I'm coming from with this. And it really is as simple as that. Now, if you're using Farseer, there are basically two things you need to know about, the body and the geometry. And these are the two things which describe an object to Farseer. I have no idea why they're in two separate parts. And that's fine by me, because I know how to make it work. In version 3, I think body and geometry are combined in some way. And is geometry spelled right there? Oh, yeah, that's okay. Yeah, geometry. Yes, okay, that's okay. But what you do is you basically make instances of these and put them in the Farseer engine. And when the XNA game updates, we update the simulator so it moves the objects around, and we create this thing at the start of the program. So very first line in the, well, this is basically made as a member of the class. I have a thing called a physics simulator, and I make a new one of these to drive Farseer. And the interesting thing here is this vector. Now, a vector is a way of expressing direction and distance of movement. And it's broken down into two components, the x component and the y component. And so I've got an x component of 0 and a y of 250. Any idea what that's for, people? 250 is your value of gravity. I think it says so on the thing. Yes, it does. So no prizes for you guys, is okay? Change that number, you can make gravity bigger or smaller. Add a horizontal component, and you get like gravity with the wind blowing. So if you want to have a wind coming across, then you can specify a different value for gravity. Now, this is set when the thing is constructed, but you can also change the direction of gravity at any point by just putting a new vector in. Okay, so if you do want to have a game where the wind starts blowing the ball around, it's really, really easy. You just change these values here. So at the moment, 250 pulls things down. Okay, but if you want to have a game level on the moon, then that's easy. Just make this value smaller. Or on Jupiter, make it bigger. And so you can get variations in gameplay by just changing that number. If I'm putting a texture, an object on the screen, then this is a shelf. Okay. Now the shelf is the thing which the house is sitting on, and it has 4 components. There's the texture, which I'm using to draw it, which is basically just a coloured bar with a little gradient fill on it. I have the body, which is the Farseer object that keeps track of the body part of the game object, and the geometry, which does the bit for geometry. And then I have a vector, and what the vector tells me is where the origin of the object is. And if I have a pen, I can kind of draw out what that means on here, just in this little gap. If this is my shelf, okay, the origin is the point in the middle about which it will rotate, and I think that's the point about which the mass acts as well. So you basically say, for the ones I'm doing, I always put the origin slap bang in the middle, so when this thing rotates, it'll spin about that point. Now that's used in drawing the thing, and I think Farseer also uses it to manage what happens when you whack things. Okay, so this is a very, very simple object. 4 elements to tell you what it is: the texture, the body, the geometry, and the vector to place it on the screen. Okay, when I make one, big slab of C#, but don't worry too much. The first line makes the texture, and so I go into my images directory, fetch the shelf asset, and I bring that in as the texture. I set the origin to be the middle point, which is halfway across and halfway down. So I'm using my texture dimensions to make the size of everything work correctly. I then make myself a body by calling this body factory method, which will make me different kinds of bodies. I want a rectangle, I want it this wide and this high, and I'm giving it a mass of 1. Mass is interesting when you start combining objects. The way they interact depends on their relative masses, but in this particular case it doesn't make a deal of difference because the shelf is static. If I set this to true, it means you're not subject to anything. You will not move. You're like nailed down in the universe, which is great because I'm going to put my house on you. I'm going to put my little house on here. So this thing has to sit in the environment so I can put my house on the top. And a couple of other things. I can then set the position, 550 across, 500 down on the screen. So that's how I place things on the screen. And then having set everything up, I add this body to my simulator. Okay? And so at that point, I've actually got the body in the simulator, and we've got part of the item defined as far as Farseer is concerned. Second thing I do is I make the geometry. A little bit more maths here, I guess. Make me a rectangle geometry with that width and that height. These 2 things, restitution coefficient and friction coefficient, great big long words. This one tells you how bouncy it is, and this one tells you how slippery it is. Okay? So if you want stuff to bounce off stuff and really fly off, make that bigger. If you want stuff to slide along things, make that smaller. Okay? So these numbers, I've no idea. They're there. They work okay. But if you want to make levels on ice and levels on tarmac, then you can do this. And you set these for every single object that you put in the system. So you can have some things that are slippery and some things which are grippy. Have rubber things and glass things if you want. We add this geometry to our simulator and we're in business. Like it says, the bottom bullet point, playing with these values is fun. You can make really strange things happen. You're behaving a bit like physics, but you're not constrained by the real world. You can make materials that are far more bouncy than rubber is, just by getting these numbers right or wrong. So, drawing it, excuse me, to draw it, we just call the draw method from SpriteBatch as per usual. We use the texture that we've got loaded. we set the position, which we get from the geometry, and the rotation we get from the geometry, and the origin that we worked out to start with, and we draw it white, and we're not using any sprite effects, and we're layering it at layer 1. So basically, you put that bit of code in. It's a slightly more advanced version of the draw method, and it takes a texture, and rather than me giving a rectangle to say where it is, we give it a vector and a rotation. Okay? And that's it. So all the game objects are drawn in the same way. So you now know how to put a shelf on the screen at a certain place and get Farseer to look after it for you, which is easy enough. And the target, that's my little house. Okay? It has the same information as stored about the shelf. There's only one difference, which is that the target isn't static. It's allowed to move. So my game aim is to knock the target off the shelf. It's as simple as that. There's my target body, target texture width, target texture height. I'm giving it a mass of 3. It's just a number that I pick, which seems to work okay. I think the ball has a mass of 1, although I can't remember that. You can fiddle with these. We don't care about the shelf mass. We do care about the target mass. So this number here, just, again, play with it. We'll play in a minute when I get the program going. This is all the usual stuff. The ball, subtly different. It has circle geometry rather than rectangle geometry. Now what they do to make a circle is you give it the radius, which is the width divided by 2, and then 50. And what 50 is the number of elements they make the circle out of. We know that you can't really have a circle in a computer because it's sort of perfectly round. 50 means that as far as Farseer is concerned, it's a polygon with 50 sides. Okay? And it will do all its physics calculation based on that. I picked the number 50 out of the air. If I made it 500, I get a better looking circle from the physics point of view, but I give the computer a lot more work to do in terms of actually doing the collisions and managing the behavior. 50 seems to work okay for me. Okay, if you start to notice things not working right, then make that number bigger, I guess. The more edges you've got, the more accurate it is, but the more work it is required to calculate it. So if you put 4, I guess you get a square, which might be what you want. I don't know. Drawing it, yeah, that's the wrong slide. Keep moving. I shouldn't be there. Okay, launching the ball is really easy. Okay, remember last time we figured out the x and y velocity from how far the gamepad had been pushed up and across. This time we don't set the velocity. We use a method called apply impulse, which is how you give things kicks in Farseer. So this will apply basically a sudden force of a certain value. And I found that take the value of x and multiply it by 500, do the same for y, but make it negative because we're going to fire it in a different, the sense of the x, the y value is reversed, then 500 seems to work. Yeah? Yes, it does. You've just basically found my Achilles heel and stuck a big knife in it. Yes. The thing I'm showing you is tied to 800 by 600. Okay? If you change the resolution, then it's not going to look, it might be quite different. So if you're cleverer than me, and who isn't, then you can probably figure out how to make it auto scale and manage that. But for the purposes of what I'm showing, 500 seems to work okay. You have to. This is the biggest pain I have had, is that to make this work, I've had to make all my textures fit exactly.
You have to. I think the only way you would be able to do it is if you load in the texture, change the texture, and save it out, and then reload the change one back in.
There are ways you can scale textures. There's also things you can do in Farseer. I've just been sent an email by someone that reckons they've cracked it. So if I figure that out, I'll put it on whatever. For now, just make every game 800 by 600, and everything in the garden will be lovely. This is my theory, and I'm happy. It works for me. It's absolutely fine. And so 500, yeah. Collisions. Farseer will produce collision events when something hits something, and to do that, it uses a C# technique called a delegate. Now, a delegate is a and this, you'll love this, it's a type-safe reference to a method in the class. Okay, at which point, apart from half the room leaves. if you want to tell something to do, well, I'm trying to think of if you want to get in touch with me, I'll give you my phone number, correct? If you want to call me, I'll give you my phone number, correct?
Yes.
Right. That's how you give something the phone number of a method. Okay? You've done this, so you understand it, do you? So you're just playing the fool there, were you? Jolly good. Oh, wow. Sorry, my brain's not working today. I'll cut that bit out of the recording. This thing here is a method that I want to get called when this event fires. The event manages a list of people it must tell when something happens. So I make a handler based on this method and add it to the collision event. And the method itself, ball hits, is this thing. Now, ball hits is called by Farseer when the ball hits something. And Farseer gives me the first geometry in the collision and the second geometry in the collision and a list of all the points where they've made contact. Yeah?
Which one's the first and which one's the second?
I don't know.
Okay.
Okay? One of them's the first and one of them's the second, all right? I don't know. Because what I've done is I've said, okay, I don't care about collisions with the shelf. If your ball hits the shelf, don't do anything, okay? So I'm saying, if geometry 1 is the shelf, or geometry 2 is the shelf, give up. Just go straight home, okay? If we get to here, it means that we're hitting the target. So I set a flag to say, okay, we're playing the sample for the target hit, and I play bang. Then I return. When I come into this, I say, have we played the sound already? And if we have, I return true. Now, the reason why I've done that is that the way that Farseer works, if something is lying on top of something else, you get a whole heap of collision events. And what happens if you do that is my sound system goes nuts because it keeps on being told to play that sound. And it does its best, but it doesn't sound very good. So the way my game works at the moment, the first collision causes the sound to play and then nothing. Now, yeah, I guess if the ball's a shell which explodes on impact, then that's fine. Okay, so this works, and that's good enough for me. It's believable. You could use it to trigger animations, and because you can get the points, you get a list of positions where the contact hit. You could make sparks appear at the point of impact, should you wish to do that, just by drawing something or making a bright sprite appear there. Okay? I'm using the same background scrolling, but this time I'm using the position property of the ball geometry to actually manage the ball as it goes across the screen. And that's it. You can mess around with it, we will in a minute, but it's simple. I've just realized there's one thing I have forgotten to tell people about, which I'll show you in the program. So if I now just drop into Visual Studio, then what I'll do, the first thing, I'll just fire the game up and show you it running, and you can be impressed by how clever I am. Okay, so there's my house. Little trick. If you want to put something on top of something, don't put them down so they're already touching, because they might rattle and bounce off each other. So I place this thing a little bit in the air and have it drop down into position. Okay, so now the house is sitting on the shelf, the thing's waiting for me to, so I'll push the thing across and I'll fire the ball. And the ball goes off and misses, which is fine. And we scroll across, and if I press this button here, I can reset. So I'll try again, a bit lower. Oh, that's not good either. Okay. Bit higher. Ah, good. So it knocks, and oh. Now, I can't fire it again, because my game doesn't support that. But you see, the idea of my game would be that I have to knock this thing off. That might work. Get that off the tee. No. Try it again. No, that's even worse. Boink. But I just find this great fun. And try one more. Oh, that's done it. That's got it going. And we're good. Right. That's what I would call a perfect shot. But the ball will now roll off. The ball will now roll off and the game will reset. Now, there is no ground. If you want to, you can put a shelf along the bottom, which is ground, and make that under the body, make it very long and go off down here, and then these things will accumulate. That's fine. I mean, the other thing what I would do at this point in the game, I'd make some code that detects when the velocity of the ball has dropped to a really low value, or if it's on this shelf, and I'd flip back into aim mode and then go on for the next one. Okay. Other things, I mean, what you can do, this is quite fun. If I stop the program now and we start playing with it, this is where it gets quite interesting, because now I can go into here. One bit of fun you can have, make the ball really heavy. That's quite nice. So we go in here, we find our ball. Where's our ball? Here's the ball. Let's just give ourselves a bit more room. At the moment, where's the ball? Ball geometry, ooh, is that really the case? No, that's the number of things, isn't it? Where's my...
It's at the end of that.
It's here, isn't it? Yeah. It's 1. Let's make it 2. Now, 2 things will happen when I do this. One of which might break the game. If I fire it now, it hardly goes anywhere. So now I have to go back in and make another change. What do I have to do now?
Make it really light.
No, increase the impulse. Give it a bigger kick. Put more energy in. So that 500, 5,000?
3 million.
3 million. Let's keep this vaguely sensible, said the man. Let's go back down here.
Rob, we're making a game called Destruction Golf. There's nothing sensible about it.
That's probably... So let's make our 500, say, 900, and then 900 here, and then run it again.
Those as constants, and then you could just change it once.
You could do that. You could make it variable. This will be great. So I'll fire it now, and it misses. Fire it again, and oh, that's more like it. That's a really good whack, and that's going to roll off the edge. But you can have a lot of fun with these. I've just remembered this one thing I've forgotten. To make the program work, remember I said you update the physics engine every time the clock goes tick. If you look in the update method at the very bottom, then there's a line you can see on the screen now. This line here is where I update the game world. That has to be in the update method, otherwise your engine will just freeze. So again, don't worry too much about these numbers. If you get too carried away with this, you can fire objects so hard they'll fly inside each other. And they get really upset when that happens. So if you want to sort of reduce the step size at which the game updates and moves things, then fiddle around with this number and make it a bit smaller. Not in my experience. No. This stuff gets stuck. I've had 5 things that things so hard they've got stuck in. In fact, they piled up. And about 6 things, all going very unhappy they were. So just drop that code in. I mean, the bottom line is that you can take the code that I've got and just play with it and add levels and add objects and see how you go. So if I fire that up, that could be a good one. No, it's not going to be a good one at all, actually. A bit further across. No. Okay. Not good at this. That's it. Love it. Okay. So really, I don't think I've got much else on the slide. Yeah. All the code you've seen you can have. It's all just there. The house has a flat roof because it didn't look right when it was a triangle, because the ball would hit here and the house would tip over. But what you can do in Farseer is you can make your own polygons. So you can make a triangle which goes on top of the house. You can knock the roof off and all kinds of other things. And so remember, you can pile these things up and the ball can knock them all over. So feel free to steal my code and do what on earth you like with it. Great fun. So there you are. I'm putting this up on destructiongolf.com in terms of the slide deck, and I'll put the recording up as well.